Every major mistake I've seen starts the same way. Someone decides they can't look stupid anymore. They don't say it out loud, of course. They dress it up in smarter language. They say things like, maybe I was too early, or the market is telling me something, or my personal favorite, I'll wait for more confirmation. But underneath all of it is the same fear. The fear of standing alone while everyone else looks right. I've watched this play out for decades. Intelligent people, experienced people, people who had already done the hard work of thinking independently. And then, right at the most important moment, they gave up not because they were wrong, but because they were uncomfortable. Here's the part most people don't want to admit. Being early feels exactly like being wrong, sometimes for a long time. When you step back from risk while markets are euphoric, nothing immediately rewards you. There's no bell that rings. No headline says, congratulations, you were prudent. Instead, prices keep rising. Friends brag. The news celebrates new highs, and you're sitting there wondering if you've lost your touch. That's when the real test begins. I've seen people abandon caution not because the facts changed, but because the waiting became unbearable. They didn't fail an intelligence test, they failed an emotional one. And emotional failures are far more expensive. Let me be blunt. If you judge your decisions by how they feel in the short term, you will eventually do something catastrophic. The market has a cruel habit of making disciplined people feel foolish right before it proves them right. Early in my career, I didn't fully appreciate how long this discomfort could last. I understood cycles intellectually. I knew excess eventually corrects. But knowing something and living through it are two very different things. Month after month of underperformance can make even the strongest conviction feel fragile. And here's what makes it worse. The crowd always looks smartest at the top. Confidence peaks right before reality intrudes. When everyone around you seems certain, uncertainty feels like a personal failure. That's when people start chasing reassurance. They look for agreement instead of truth. They want someone to tell them they're not crazy. And when they finally get that reassurance, it usually comes too late to matter. Most people don't realize that the market rarely rewards foresight on your schedule. It rewards it on its own, and it charges interest for every moment you doubt yourself. If you're watching this and you're in the second half of your investing life, this lesson matters even more. You don't have decades to recover from emotional mistakes. You don't get unlimited chances to learn the hard way. At this stage, one bad decision can undo years of careful planning. That's why the ability to look wrong temporarily is not a weakness. It's a requirement. The people who survive long enough to succeed are not the ones who avoid embarrassment, they're the ones who tolerate it. They accept that being early comes with isolation, criticism, and long stretches of silence. They don't confuse discomfort with error. If there's one thing I wish I had fully understood sooner, it's this. The market tests your resolve before it rewards your judgment. And most people fail the test not because they were mistaken, but because they couldn't stand being alone with their own thinking. The real damage doesn't happen when people are early. It happens when they stop trusting why they were early in the first place. I've seen this more times than I can count. Someone recognizes excess valuation stretched, optimism unrestrained, risk ignored. They reduce exposure. They build caution into their portfolio. Intellectually, they've done everything right, and then the market keeps going up. At first, they're calm. They tell themselves they're being disciplined. But as weeks turn into months, discipline starts to feel like punishment. Underperformance becomes personal. They don't just question the decision, they question themselves. That's when the stories begin. I guess things are different this time. Maybe the risk isn't as high as I thought. Everyone else seems fine. These aren't insights. They're coping mechanisms. What people don't understand is that markets don't move on logic alone. They move on emotion, narrative, and momentum. And those forces can overpower fundamentals far longer than feels reasonable. Being early means accepting that reality without surrendering to it. I had to learn this the hard way. Early in my career, I believed that correct analysis would be quickly rewarded. I assumed that if I saw risk clearly, the market would eventually acknowledge it soon. That assumption was naive. The market doesn't care about your timetable. It doesn't care how long you've waited. And it certainly doesn't care how uncomfortable you feel. This is where most people make their worst mistake. They confuse duration with error. They think that because something hasn't happened yet, it won't happen at all. And that's a dangerous misunderstanding. Time doesn't invalidate an idea. Sometimes it tests whether you actually believe it. There's another uncomfortable truth I need to say out loud. Watching other people make money while you sit on the sidelines is psychologically brutal. It triggers envy, doubt, and a deep sense of missing out. And those emotions don't go away just because you're experienced. If anything, they get worse because you feel like you should know better. That's why people re-enter risk at precisely the wrong moment. Not because conditions improved, but because emotional pressure finally broke them. They tell themselves they're being flexible, when in reality they're surrendering. And the market, cruel as it is, tends to punish surrender. What separates the survivors from the casualties isn't foresight, it's emotional endurance. The ability to say, I may be early, but I'm not wrong, and live with that discomfort longer than feels reasonable. If you're approaching retirement, this matters more than ever. You don't have the luxury of chasing validation. You don't have the time to undo large mistakes driven by impatience. At this stage, protecting what you've built is far more important than proving you're clever. I've learned to think about investing less as a game of prediction and more as a test of temperament. The best decisions often look foolish before they look wise. And the cost of abandoning them early is almost always invisible until it's irreversible. So if you feel isolated right now, if your caution makes you feel out of step, that doesn't mean you're failing. It may mean you're doing exactly what the moment requires. The market doesn't ring a bell when risk peaks, it whispers. And only those willing to endure being early are still listening when the whisper turns into a warning. There's a myth I want to tear apart, because it causes more damage than almost anything else I've seen. You've been told that smart investing is about being right. That if you just analyze harder, read more, and refine your models, you'll avoid pain. That's wrong. Pain isn't a sign of failure in investing. It's often a sign that you're early, and early is where the value is. When you're early, the evidence doesn't line up neatly yet. Prices don't confirm your thinking. Headlines don't support you. The crowd isn't on your side. And that's exactly why most people can't stay there. I've watched investors with sound reasoning abandon their positions because they couldn't tolerate ambiguity. They wanted certainty. They wanted validation. They wanted the market to tell them they were right. But by the time the market does that, the opportunity is usually gone. Here's another hard truth. The market is not designed to make you feel comfortable. It's designed to extract emotional mistakes. And the most common emotional mistake is confusing short-term outcomes with long-term correctness. People love to say, the market is telling us something. No, it's not. The market is reflecting what people are willing to pay today under the influence of fear and greed. That's all. It's not a moral judge. It's not a crystal ball. And it certainly isn't a scoreboard for intelligence. I had to learn to separate the outcome from the process. That was one of the most important lessons of my career. A good decision can lead to a bad short-term result. A bad decision can be rewarded temporarily. If you don't understand that distinction, you'll chase noise and abandon discipline. Let me say this clearly for anyone watching who feels anxious right now. If your portfolio decisions are being driven by embarrassment, you're in trouble. Embarrassment is not a risk metric. Social pressure is not analysis. The desire to avoid looking wrong is one of the most powerful forces in investing. It pushes people into crowded trades. It keeps them in bubbles longer than they should be. And it convinces them to abandon caution right before it matters most. I've also learned that the longer markets go without consequences, the harder it becomes to stay disciplined. Extended success breeds overconfidence. Overconfidence breeds complacency. And complacency invites disaster. That's why being early requires something most people never train: emotional resilience. The ability to endure boredom, criticism, and self-doubt without changing your behavior. This isn't talked about enough, but it's the difference between surviving cycles and becoming a victim of them. If you're still investing the same way you did in your 30s, ask yourself why. Time changes the rules. As you get older, the margin for error shrinks, Recovery takes longer, mistakes hurt more. Yet many people take more risk, not less, because they're afraid of missing out. That fear is understandable, but it's also dangerous. I've come to believe that the goal isn't to be proven right quickly. The goal is to still be standing when reality finally asserts itself. Markets always revert, excess always corrects. The only question is whether you'll still have the patience and the capital to benefit when it does. Being early is not a flaw. It's the price of prudence. And most people simply aren't willing to pay for it. If there's one habit I've seen that separates the people who last from the people who disappear, it's this. They build their decisions around survival, not applause. Applause is intoxicating. It comes when prices are rising and confidence is high. But applause fades quickly and it offers no protection when conditions change. Survival, on the other hand, is quiet. It rarely feels exciting. And it almost never feels validating at the moment. Over time, I stopped asking myself whether a decision would look smart next month. I started asking a different question. Will this decision still make sense if things go badly? That single shift changed everything. Let me strip this down to something simple you can actually use. First, stop judging decisions by short-term results. Results lag reality, always. What matters is whether your reasoning still holds under stress. If it does, impatience is not a signal to act. Second, simplify. Complexity gives the illusion of control, but it also hides risk. The more moving parts you need to be right, the more likely you are to abandon the plan when pressure rises. Third, leave room for error. Being early means accepting that you might wait longer than you expect. If your financial position can't tolerate waiting, then the problem isn't timing, it's structure. Fourth, protect first, reach second, especially later in life. Growth is optional, survival is not. The market will always offer another opportunity, but it rarely gives back capital once it's lost. And finally, prepare yourself emotionally. This is the part no one wants to talk about. If you can't handle looking wrong for a while, you won't handle being right when it matters. Emotional preparation is as real as financial preparation. I want to leave you with this thought, because it took me years to truly internalize it. The market doesn't reward intelligence, it rewards behavior. Specifically, behavior that remains steady when the environment is anything but. Being early will test your patience. It will test your confidence, and it will test your identity. But those tests are not bugs in the system, they are the system. If you felt doubt watching others chase returns while you hold back, you're not broken, you're being tested. And passing that test often looks like doing nothing while everyone else is doing too much. I learned this too late, but you don't have to. Being early feels like being wrong. That discomfort is not a signal to quit, it's the cost of staying safe. If you want more hard-earned lessons without the sugarcoating, subscribe and don't miss the next one.